Welcome, Bronco Nation, to another exciting interview here on the channel. I have a very special guest with me today. We've actually been trying to get him on the channel for a couple of years. He was supposed to come on a couple of years ago when we had Derek Schumann and Dryzen James on the channel to preview the Boise State wide receiver room. Timing-wise, didn't work out, but we finally have him on the channel today. It is fantastic to have Tim Gilligan on the channel with me today, Boise State wide receiver from 1999 to 2003. He is one of the top wide receivers in Boise State history. Receiving wise, throughout that time, he had over 1,600 yards receiving, averaged 16.5 yards average, 10 touchdowns. And in 2003, which again is one of the most incredible single seasons for any wide receiver in Boise State history, he had over 1,100 yards receiving, which is fifth all time for Boise State. He had 255 yards versus La Tech, which is third all time for most yards in a game. And then he did it again versus BYU. Love to see that versus BYU. 209 yards versus BYU, which is actually eighth all time. So he's one of only four players in school history to have two 200 yards games. And then punt returning, he was a great punt returner for Boise State as well, averaged over 11 yards per punt return and a touchdown. And in 2001, his 39 punt returns are second overall in school history, and his 14-yard average in 2002 is fifth. He was named by The Athletic in 2020 as the most memorable Boise State player to ever wear the number 87, and he's credited with being part of the impetus for the Halo rule, which is, if anybody doesn't know, is the rule that you can't interfere with a punt returner within a certain distance of them, because he was such a fearless punt returner, he would never fair catch, and he had several big hits that helped actually kind of change the way that college football is approached as a whole. So he's a historic Bronco for Boise State, but he's also a historic football player and his impact on the game. Thanks so much for coming on today, Tim.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me. This is great.
This is going to be a great discussion. We're going to talk about your time at Boise State, obviously laying that foundation for future success. You got to have an incredible individual impact yourself, but you also got to play with a bunch of other historic legends at Boise State that also had massive impacts, both during your time at Boise State and after you left, continuing that legacy. We're going to talk about some big moments during your time at Boise State, that win versus Fresno State. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that 2003 season. We'll talk about the perspective you had being on the roster with some of those Fiesta Bowl guys and what you thought of them when they were at Boise State and what you were kind of looking in the future if you saw that coming. And then we're going to talk about the present, which is why we have you on had a chance to bring you on the channel today, which is your nephew is now at Boise State this season, transfer from Utah State, Cooper Jones. And we're going to talk all about that. Going to be a great video. So thanks for coming on. Let's get to the first question. One of the things that's very notable about you, and we mentioned it right at the beginning, is that you would never fair catch. You would always be out there trying to take that hits and trying to get every inch of yard that you could. So what was it about your personality and play style that you think made you successful at Boise State? We rattled off a bunch of statistics that you accomplished, but what was it personally about you that you think allowed you to be able to go out in there and achieve that?
Well, mine started, I'm a little guy, and so, I wanted to be on the field as much as I could. And so in high school, I did every position that I possibly could. And that was because I wanted to get out there. I believed in myself. I wanted to be, an influence on, my teammates as well as showing, somebody can go out there and do well by working hard. But it was the opportunity to go out there and help my team in any aspect. And obviously with the rule back then, it made things a lot easier not to fair catch, but it was, like I said, it was my opportunity to get out there on the field, and I didn't want to waste any opportunity. I wanted to take advantage of it. And what other way to get out there and be like, okay, no matter what, this guy's going to be returning. I can't take a play off. I need to go out here and block for this guy, and help out with whether if it's field position or a touchdown or, just swinging the tide of the game with momentum and everything like that. So that was my mindset as far as getting out there and punt returning and wanting to have an impact for my team.
We'll talk about having an impact for your team and trying to help out any way you could to lay a foundation for success. You and your entire team were able to do that at Boise State. When we look back on Boise State now, we have a different view of the program than when you stepped foot on campus. Boise State is now seen as the Fiesta Bowl winner, the giant killer, the always undefeated or, one or two loss program. But that wasn't Boise State before you came to them. They had just got into the FBS in 1996. And between 1996 and 1998, they won only 10 games between those those three total seasons. From 1999 to 2003, they only had one season where they had less than 10 wins. You and your teammates really set a foundation of success at Boise State, and a lot of what Boise State would achieve after you left started while you were there on the blue. So, what was it that your teammates did? What was it that the coaches did to set this foundation that would become the Boise State norm?
They believed in us. They wanted us to be champions, and they they set, like you said, the foundation for hard work. And and we saw our coaches putting in the work every single day, them watching film, them doing scouting reports, them coming out, you know um and checking us out in the weight rooms and cheering us on, and helping us get stronger and faster, not just physically but mentally too. The psychological part was there, and we wanted to prove that we could be champions. We when I first got there, Coach Koetter was there, and Coach Koetter, he's an amazing, amazing coach. He is probably, you know, uh, he's in my mind a genius. So he just basically set and all the other coaches as well, set us up for success. All we had to go out there was execute the game plan, um, believe in ourselves, and everything was going to fall into place as long as we were all on the same page. And it started with believing that we could be champions. And so we started with having a big chip on our shoulder and going out there and something, that we wanted to prove. The BCS was back then, and so we wanted to be a part of that, even though it was never going to happen. It was still a big thing. And we wanted to crack the top 25. We wanted to prove that we were one of the top, teams in the nation, top colleges in the nation, that we could play with anybody, anywhere. And also a big part of that too started with playing at home, and proving that we had one of the best home locations and one of the hardest places to play in the country. I remember with that, it was, the fans made it so electric, and it was very simple back then. It was just show up, have a bunch of energy, be excited for the game, know that we're going to win. And we came out and we lit up the scoreboard, so it started with that. And it just kind of clicked from there.
You mentioned the fans. Obviously, when you got to Boise State, they were the team was still establishing that winning record. Did you see a change in the fan energy and expectations from when you started at Boise State till when you left?
Absolutely. I have a kind of a funny story. When I was there my first 2 years with Coach Koetter and everything, we were starting to have some success, and people were starting to show up, and we were getting close to selling out the game and everything like that. And then when Coach Koetter left and Coach Hawk took over and brought in Coach Pete and everything, we had that first game against Washington State and we got blown out. Um, and everybody was talking about, how exciting the atmosphere was at Boise State, and, how it changes the game and how it's such a big home field advantage for us. And Coach Pete, after that game, he called us out and he said, like, I didn't see exactly what you guys were talking about. I didn't see no electricity. I didn't feel no vibe for what you guys were talking about. And that was like a motivator for us to be like, okay, we need to set the tone for the fans as well. And when we did that next final game, and the games after that, the fans did start showing up, and it was electric. It was, I mean, like, it's electric now. I go in there and I watch the games, and I get goosebumps watching them come out onto the field. And for us back then, it was just, we went around the side of the stands and we jumped up and down for a few minutes to get ourselves pumped up, and then ran onto the field. And for the fans to be able to feed off of that energy back then, that's pretty special. And that just shows you what kind of fans that Boise State has.
Well, you talk about those coaches leading the locker room, but it wasn't just the coaches. You had great players that were also leading you guys. You were one of them, but you also had Ryan Dinwiddie, who's been on the channel before. Brock Forsey, David Michael also came on, and then Jeb Pootsier. And I'm just naming a few off the top. You had so many other players that it would take us the entire video if we just started naming every guy on the roster. But what was the impact of the leaders that we've mentioned, and there were others that were on the team? What was their impact on helping establish that culture at Boise State?
The belief. Those guys that you mentioned just right there, they were some of the most confident guys I've ever been around. Especially when you talk about Dinwiddie and David Michael. uh, I think a lot of people would back me up on that one, but like the belief and the confidence of being able to put in some hard work and come out and play and show that we belong was a big motivator for not just for me but for everybody else on the team. um and yeah, I mean, it was just the confidence level. I've never been around anything like that. It was, I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about it right now, like, sometimes you can sit there and say, wow, that's pretty arrogant of these people, to kind of, talk about that. But it's true. You need that in a winning program, for people to spark, electricity behind, a fire underneath you to get you going.
Well, you talk about that belief and that confidence, and that was definitely on display in 2001 when Boise State rolled into Fresno State, a top 10 program. And again, this was back in the day where Boise State, Fresno State, they have a very healthy, strong rivalry now with the Milk Can Trophy and everything like that. But back then, Fresno State was probably thinking, who's this on our schedule? And Boise State showed up, and they showed up in a big way. Can you talk about what that week of prep was like? The mood, the expectations? Was this a circled game you guys had on the calendar? Can you talk a little bit about that preparation for that matchup?
It wasn't, from what I remember, a circled game until we saw what Fresno State was doing that season. They started showing who they were. And they were talking about cracking the BCS and being a BCS buster and everything. So it ended up kind of turning into that. But the week preparing for that, there's two different ways I can go with this. One of the first way was us just saying, okay, we've got a great game plan. We know we can play with these guys. Just go out and execute it. And it started from that first Tuesday practice was just like, okay, let's dump it all in. Let's get it all put into our minds right now. See what we got to do. Let's start with preparing for perfection here, and just executing and going from there. Getting back to the basics, doing our fundamentals and our hard work and our belief that we know that we can do as Boise State Broncos. Um, so that was one thing I remember about that game or about that week leading up to it. And then also, Kendall Edwards was the guy who hit me on that punt return. He was already famous because the very first game of that year, he hit an Oregon State player and broke his wrist on national TV on a punt return. And so, and he just got flagged for it. I believe there was no penalty, there was no other further suspension or anything. And so, he kind of made a name for himself of being like, a hunter down there on special teams. And so everybody, I mean, literally everybody was like, Tim, you're going to get laid out this week, right? And so I'm like, wow, this is really, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, like it's going to be a national televised game. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting creamed on national television, uh, so there was that as far as being able to go, okay, well, let's show them what we got. Let's show them what we can do. He obviously beat us to the punch on it, but
Well, hey, they told the future perfectly, but what they didn't tell the future on was that you guys were going to actually go out and win that game. I don't think that's a thing that a lot of people expected. The team had faith, but I don't think even the fans were saying Boise State's definitely going to go win this game, and you did. But it wasn't easy early in the game, or not even early, kind of midway point. Boise State's down 7-20. I mean, so you're down over two possessions there, or sorry, at two possessions there, and you ended up winning the game 35-30. But there was a real point there where it could have gotten out of hand. Can you describe the atmosphere on the sideline and what clicked, what changed, who spoke up to get you guys back into that game?
it was my hit. We were down 20-7 and I got hit and came over to the sideline and it lit everybody up. And we went down and I believe we scored right before halftime and cut it to a one possession game. And then we went into the locker room and I kind of had a little psychological breakdown where I kind of lost it there. It kind of sank in what happened to me. But everybody in the locker room was like, we got this, we can do this. And so I remember being on the sideline, and having to leave the game because they wanted to go check out my throat and everything. But I remember walking up that walkway I don't know if you've ever been to a Fresno State game where they walk, it's not a tunnel, but it's just a ramp that you walk down
Okay.
into the stadium by all the fans. And I remember walking up that thing and seeing our first possession of that second half and watching D Mike and Brock break off some runs. And I'm like, we got this. I'm like, we're gonna turn this around. Like this is we've got the momentum, and and it was a nervous feeling in that stadium. And whenever you can do that on the road, it's one of the greatest feelings that you can have, besides scoring a touchdown on the road or at home, in front of your fans. Once like we've got the momentum, we've got this. Let's go out and do it, and then like I said, I had to watch the rest of the game from the hospital, but
Oh, jeez.
so I can't really say what it was like on the sideline for the rest of the game. But for me, I was confident in that we were going to pull this off, and that we just needed one more stop at the end, and our defense hung in there, and Sasser and Q got to the quarterback, got to David Carr on the very end there, and we pulled it out, and we got the win.
Wow. Obviously, not there in the moment from the win, but afterwards, getting to celebrate with the team after the week afterwards, you prep for the next matchup. What was the reaction to that win? I mean, from the team, from the fans, it announced. It really, when you look back on it, it announced Boise State's entrance as the team to beat in their conference, and that's from that point on. Boise State was the head of the WAC of the Mountain West, whatever conference they've been in. They've been that team, and it all started with that win versus Fresno State. Were you all aware of how big that win was in the moment? What was the reaction to that performance?
I would say we were aware when we got home. When we got home and we could turn on ESPN and see the highlights, that was like, oh, because we were all hanging out together after the game when we got home, and we just looked at each other and said, like, guys, we can do this. Like this is going to be special. And we've got the coaches to get us there too. Like they put together that game plan and we executed it as the best that we could. And it was like, let's see what's next week's going to be like, and let's just take it one week at a time. But we know that we got something cool here, so let's ride this as far as we can ride it.
Well, you guys would go through the rest of that season and through the rest of your time at Boise State, and it really all kind of culminated with that final year with 2003, which, when you look on back on it, that really is one of the most special seasons for Boise State. Obviously, there's so many other seasons that followed it that overshadow that season. Obviously, 2006, 2009, 2014, a lot of other great seasons in between. But when you look back on the history of Boise State, 2003 was such a special year. You guys were one loss away from being an undefeated program that year, only by 2 points, and on a very, very questionable call on fourth down, where clear fumble, referees ruled it forward progress. We're not going to rehash history, but it is interesting that two times referees have been responsible for a loss to a team with acronyms OSU. I'm just going to say that's very interesting out there. Different OSUs both times, but very interesting. You personally had a great season, obviously, 200 plus yard games, a historic fifth best receiving season overall, Boise State history. Had the biggest win in school history to date versus Nevada, which probably was very special for you having come from Nevada, 56-3. And then you won versus TCU in the Fort Worth Bowl, number 18 versus number 19, two nationally relevant teams, which again was not the norm for Boise State before you guys got there. And it kicked off the Boise State TCU rivalry. That's 2003 season was incredible. Can you talk a little bit about that season, what that meant for you, and the impact that that season had on the team and the trajectory of the program?
Yeah, I mean, that was a very, like on paper too, a very explosive season. Um, I think we led the nation in points per game. We were almost like 50 points a game. I think it was like 48 or something like that, yards per game. We were selling out games left and right. I mean, the fans were really getting into it and everything. That was a whole nother area of the Boise State program changing as far as that was concerned, because it was like, okay, now we need to up our facilities. If like we want to keep on doing this, we've got to we got to see the people, open up their wallets and start spending some money so we can upgrade our facilities, because we didn't have the greatest stuff,
Right.
and it was like we deserve that now, so we need we need some stuff to change here, you know. And I think Coach Hawk, he ended up getting the indoor facility. That was the start of us getting the indoor facility, and that changed, you know, that the outlook of what it looks like down there right now, you know. But as far as the season was concerned, it was the one thing that I take from it was, you know, the BYU game. That was a big game for us because that was Thursday. That was with Coach, you know, Lee Corso and Herb Street. But that was a Thursday night game that we were able to show people what we were about in the snow at BYU, and then also getting out of Boise State and playing a bowl game on the road, especially at TCU. You know, that was their home game. You know,
Mm.
that was their bowl game for their home stadium. So to go out and play that type of a game on national TV as well, that was awesome. And that just kind of helped propel, you know, Coach Pete and everybody to get, you know, even more momentum to that 2006 season where they went to the Fiesta Bowl, you know. So because it was, you know, it was like, okay, we can play outside of Boise State. We, you know,
Mm.
we can do more than just win at home.
Right. Well, that 2003 season for you personally was incredible. The team overall, but for you personally as well. What were your goals coming into that season? Did you kind of set yourself like I'm going to go out and get 1,000 yard season this year, or did it just kind of happen? What were your goals coming into that season?
My goals were just to lead the wide receivers, you know, just to be a leader. I didn't have any specific paper written down paper goals of saying I'm going to be 1,000 yard receiver because I didn't have the greatest stats leading into that season as it was, you know. But I saw what Billy Wingfield did the year prior to that. He was a big inspiration for me to be a leader of that wide receiver group. You know, I mean, I was a team captain as well, so that was another part of it. You know, as far as, you know, being a leader. But my overall goal was to not to get injured, and I was injured a lot. I was not 100% the whole season. The very first play of the game against Idaho State, I got a hip pointer, and it
Mm,
knocked I mean, the hip pointer was the second most
mm,
uh hurtful injury I've ever had.
mm,
I hear about hip pointers and I just cringe. I'm just like, oh my gosh,
mm,
I know what that feels like. So if I did have one goal, it was not to be injured, but that wasn't
mm.
the case. But we had great trainers and great people to keep us healthy enough, you know, to go out there and play and continue the season. And you know, yeah, it was a special season for sure, you know, especially individually.
That 2003 season, we've talked about how special it was, how great your guys' performances were, the point totals and everything else like that. What was the team's mission that season that kind of set things a little bit apart from previous years? Obviously, the next year, 2004, Utah would go and break the BCS as the first non-BCS conference team to do it. Was that the goal for you guys in 2003, or was there something else that you were setting yourselves up as a team to try and go out and accomplish as your top mission that year?
Well, 2001, kind of going back a little bit, 2001, we ended up losing to La Tech down at La Tech, and that bumped us out of a bowl game. And so 2002 was a leave no, our phrase for it was leave no doubt. And so it was like, okay, we're going to come in. We're not going to let anybody be an influence on what we want to do for our goals and in our accomplishments. And so we did that in 2002. And then in 2003, it was prove it. It was like, okay, no, we did it once, we can do it again, and we're going to prove that we are one of those teams that we can be there and that we can do it consistently and we can do it over and over and over again. So that was the goal for our 2003 season, was prove it, you know, and that we belonged not just, you know, within our conference but outside of our conference as well.
Well, prove it you all did. Like I said, one game away from an undefeated season, rolling in to play TCU at their home. Top 20 programs, both top 20 ranked matchup. And again, that is the game that really kicked off the Boise State TCU rivalry. Can you talk about that bowl game experience, leaving the blue out of the NPC Computer Bowls or whatever it was called at the time? You're over into actually in Texas, out of the state, playing away in another team's home environment for for a bowl game with a lot of pressure on your guys back there after what you did in 2003, and going up against a top program in the country and top 20 TCU. Can you talk about the preparation for in that game itself?
Well, that one, obviously, it was finally, I mean, like a bowl experience is very special to begin with, even if you're in the same city as where you're playing with. Like when we played it for the H Bowl, the humanitarian bowls, it was still fun. It was still a great experience. And so for us to go outside of it and be on the road and do it, that made it even that much more special, and it was different. It was a challenge as far as, knowing that we're not going to be on our own filled in a comfort setting, as knowing where we're going to practice and preparing, and where we're going to be watching film, and where we can get treatment and everything like that. So we were in hotels watching that, doing our walkthroughs in hotels, and uh practicing on weird fields, high school fields and everything like that. So I remember that was a challenge for us, and that was something that we embraced as well. That was like, okay, this is how it is. This is how it's going to be, and this is how it needs to be for the rest of these young kids. So that was cool too, to see the young kids get their first bowl experience, and see what that was like for them. A lot of them had like little deer in the headlight looks, but you could tell that they were soaking it up. They were sponges. They you could see that they wanted to continue the success, and that they had that hunger and they had that grit, to work hard and work their way into it, pay their dues, be blue collar like we were, and like what we did. So that was one of the things that I remembered of the experience, besides the game. And then obviously the game was, electric. It was a high scoring game, came down to we had a little bit of luck on our side. Their kicker got hurt, and their backup kicker couldn't kick as far as their other kicker did, and he kicked it was short, and we won the game. So we had some luck on our side too. And so like that kind of, sometimes you'd rather be lucky than good. So yeah, it was a memorable game for sure. It was up there for the 2003 seasons, for sure.
At the end of that game, was there a little bit of bitterness feelings? I mean, obviously, Boise State TCU is one of the great unofficial rivalries, and so unfortunate we don't play them anymore. But I mean, every TCU game from that point on has been an absolute knockout game. And was there that feeling that this might be the start of something a little bit more than just a game at the end of that matchup?
I mean, I thought about that a little bit. My main feeling for me after the game was I'm glad this is over. I was playing with a broken femur.
Oh my gosh. Jeez.
So I was just trying to get through the game and help the team any way that I could. But there were times during that game where it was like, I mean, you could see where TCU was going to go as a program. Uh, I can't remember their coach's name, but he was an amazing coach, is an amazing coach, and he was taking their program somewhere. And so it was like, okay, we just beat this team on their own field,
Hmm.
and this might turn out into something down the road, and it did, obviously.
Mhm.
So yeah, when people talk about the TCU games, it's like, yeah, we set the tone for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, we got them first. So that's always a good feeling.
Well, I love that you talk about setting the tone there in general, because you talk about those young guys, the deer in the headlights looks, but the expectation that they knew they were going to be able to take this and continue it into even above the accomplishments that you guys did, build on that foundation to even higher success. So before we move into talking about the present with your nephew, obviously joined the program, let's talk about some of those young guys that have been on the team there. And again, not to rattle off every single player that was at Boise State when you were there that would go on to do great things, but Jared Zabransky, Dryzen James, Derek Schumann, Legadu Nane, all of these great players. A couple of those guys have been on the channel. Was there a sense looking at them and what they did while you were at Boise State? And some of them didn't do that much while you were there. They kind of picked up after you left. But was there a sense just kind of looking at them and being in the locker room with them that they were going to carry this program to new heights after you guys were done carrying the hammer?
Yeah, absolutely. They like I said, they were hungry. They wanted to do it themselves too. We could see that in practice every single day, whether when we were doing one-on-ones or when they were doing scout team. Especially with Dryzen James, he's very competitive. Um, I remember talking to him many times, trying to get him to calm down, to relax and just go out there, and continue to be competitive, but to calm down. He would get so angry, and I think he reeled that in, once he got a little older, and obviously he had great success in the Fiesta Bowl, and LA, Legadunani LA. He had a great careers. Jared Zabransky had a great career, and so like looking back on it now and seeing how not only did they, continue the success at Boise State, but past Boise State, that's where I get a great sense of satisfaction for them.
Something that helped those guys be able to go out and perform at such a high individual level and set themselves up for future success. And something that you got to benefit from as well was Chris Peterson. And you were there when it was baby Chris Peterson early on in his career, before he would go on to be the head coach in 2006 and everything else that he would do at Boise State and Washington and afterwards. So can you talk a little bit about being there when Chris Peterson was developing his coaching style, and some of the lessons that he taught you, and what you kind of, if you thought looking at him that he was going to become one of the greatest coaches in school history?
Well, what's funny about Coach Pete was I remember having so many conversations with him, and he was like, "I don't want to be a head coach." He's like, I'll never be a head coach." And so when he left, or I mean, when he took the coaching job at Boise State, it was like, okay, all right, But when he left and went to Washington, I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I totally understand looking back on it now, and seeing where he was at in his career and everything. I totally understand why he left, and what his goals were, and what they continue to be and everything like that. But overall, Coach Pete, the one thing, that was always with him was he was excited. He was always so excited to go to work every day and put together a game plan, or just put together a playbook that he knew that we'd be able to go out and execute. Him and the other coaches had a lot of anxiety. They were always really just like, "Are you sure you can do this? Are you sure you can do that?" I don't know. You really got to be able to get your mind in the right spot. And I know who you're going against this weekend. It's not going to be easy. And it was always like, "Man, coach, relax, calm down, we got this." And we got that from the coaches. But they were always motivating us, always excited, always ready for that next day at work, and for us to show up after we went to class and everything, for us to get back to work on the field, and develop what we have, or what we had, and you know continue to be successful. So that was one thing I always remember about Coach Pete. And I love Coach Pete. I'm so excited for him. Every time I see him on TV, I get goosebumps, thinking about the past and everything like that, and everything everywhere that he's been. So it's pretty awesome that he's doing what he's doing, and where he came from, and that he came from, that I was able to be a part of that. I'm very grateful for that.
Well, one more thing here to bridge the gap into the present. You already mentioned Dirk Koetter and being able to play under him, and saying that he was a genius. And I think we were able to see that when he stepped into the offensive coordinator role in the interim. But he's now back. He's now back as the offensive coordinator at Boise State this season. So as we move into talking about the present and talking about your nephew joining the team, if you could just take a few minutes real quick here, just talk about Dirk Koetter, and what your expectations and excitement for him coming back to Boise State are, and what your own thoughts were when you heard he'd taken the news to come out of retirement and step back into the saddle one more time.
Well, there's one other person that needs a statue besides Coach Pete, and that's Coach Cutter. I love when I heard that he came back. I was like, get that man a statue. He is gonna save this program again, and he's gonna put us back where we need to be again. And so, but one other thing about Coach Cutter, there's with how much respect and how much love I have for that guy. He was, there are only two men in this world that have ever intimidated me the most. The first one was my dad, and the second one was Coach Cutter. And I've told my nephew Cooper about it, and he's already had some interactions, obviously, with Coach Cutter, and some stories and stuff that we'll tell. I'll save for later. But yeah, having Coach Cutter back, super excited. I'm really excited to see what he's gonna do.
Well, the excitement around this program is definitely warranted. Like you mentioned there, we've got some great talent on the field. Malachi Nelson, Maddox Madsen. We'll see who ends up taking the starting role there. It's an exciting competition. Dirk Koetter coming back. All the excitement that's built around Spencer Danielson stepping into his first season. Ashton Genty. There's so many exciting moments for this team. But I know for you personally, this season has also got an additional element of excitement. That's because you now get to see your nephew step out on the blue, follow your footsteps there to Boise State. And while he's not taken the wide receiver route, playing running back at Utah State, he has taken after you in the punt return game. And that's something he did at Utah State and has a chance to potentially do here at Boise State as well. Can you talk a little bit about the thoughts of and excitement about your nephew returning to the blue? Did you have any kind of pushing and prodding there, trying to get him over? What were your own thoughts about your nephew coming to Boise State, following in your footsteps there?
Obviously, it's exciting, and the first time I met my nephew Cooper was on the blue. He came up. He was just a brand new baby, and my sister and my brother-in-law came up for a game, and they were able to come down on the field after the game, and I got to hold him for the first time, and so that was the first time I ever got to meet my nephew was on the blue. So the fact that he's actually finally here now. We tried to get him here before Utah State. Um, but it just didn't work out. That the pieces just weren't there for that to work out and everything. But now that he is here, I was able to communicate a little bit, but it started with Coach Collins. Coach Collins was there at Utah State when Cooper was there. He brought in Cooper, and so when Coach Collins came back to Boise State, that's what started the conversation of because you know things Cooper's situation at Utah State changed drastically, unfortunately. Um, and it opened up an opportunity for him to come here, and that was his overall dream. That was his overall, goal was to be here, and the fact that he gets, an opportunity to try to do that, win a spot, at the punt returner position, we'll see how he does and everything. But he's very confident. He believes that he can do it. And another big part of he's actually living with me right now until he finds his own place, so
Nice.
I get to see him after workouts and everything during the summer. He comes home, he's just exhausted and because they're doing things at Boise State that they don't do at Utah State. So he's not used to
Hmm.
that, so he's learning how the Boise State Broncos do things compared to Utah State. Which I love to see that. I love to see him walking around stiff and sore and him learning what the upper decks are like, and everything like that. Um, and also he just became a dad.
Hmm.
He's got a little baby now. I think Miles, he's 4 months old now, so I get to see him a little bit, be a dad and take care of another human being and be responsible for somebody else. So to see the growth with being the type of person that he is, because he is a great kid. I mean, and I'm not just biased. I'm not just saying that because he is my nephew. He is a great, great kid, and that's the big thing about it. He's a great student, a great person, and that's one of the big things I love, and that's one of the big things that brought him to Boise State as well was the coaches talking about how they love 5-star recruits, but they love 5-star people, and that's what they labeled Cooper as, and that's a big that's a big accomplishment right there in itself. And I think Cooper should really be proud of that.
So on pizza movie nights, you guys breaking out some of your old game film, walking him through, giving him some wisdom. What?
You know what? We did break out the 2003 highlight film the other
Nice,
night. He
nice.
he talked me into it. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm not going to put this on, but he did, and so he was, and because I mean, he as a kid watched it, a million times, so he knows the highlight film inside and out, and so it motivates him. So whatever gets him motivated and get him going, I'm all for it. So, I gotta kind of swallow that pill a little bit and, just be like, okay, I can't believe it's been 25 years since I've started, almost 21 years since it's all been done, so yeah, it's been good.
Well, Cooper and I then are of the same mind right there. I love you mentioning the 2003 highlight film because that's something that I've watched. He's obviously he's got the family blood, so he's probably watched it more times than I have. But I own every Boise State highlight film from the first one they made in 2000, I think it is 2000, all the way until the last one. There was like an unofficial one made in 2015, and then I made a bunch myself. And before every single season, during the off season, I watched through every film. So I've seen it, once or twice every single year for the last 10 years.
That's
Or so
awesome.
back. So yeah, it's great that you guys are being able to have that connection. It's awesome that to be able to see your nephew return to the blue. I know that that's definitely, like you said, gotta make you feel old, because everyone's still in their own head. You think like, oh, I'm still that young guy playing, and then now you've got your nephew is that young guy playing. You go, well, okay, maybe it's been a little bit longer than I thought thought
Yeah.
it had in there. But it's going to be
Yeah.
awesome to be able to see him picking up and continuing in the steps that you left there at Boise State. Fantastic and exciting to see him returning to the blue. Exciting and fantastic opportunity to watch what this team is going to be able to go out and accomplish this year. So
Yeah.
thanks so much for coming on and walking us through that history there of that season, that 2000 to 2003 season. Another reason I love watching these highlight films over and over again is what set the foundation, the tone for what Boise State was going to become. Everything that's synonymous with what Boise State is now started while you and Ryan Dinwiddie and Dave Michael and Brock Forsey and everybody was at Boise State. And so thank you so much for coming on and helping us take a look back into the past. I'm a big guy about respecting and honoring the past, being excited about living in the present, being excited about the future. And so when you have a season where it's a recent history hasn't been what Boise State fans have come to expect, being able to talk to somebody that was at Boise State when there were no expectations, when you were going out and establishing that winning culture, and so maybe getting to get a peek behind the curtain of what this current team is doing, trying to reestablish that winning culture for Boise State, I think it really brings together a great perspective and gives us a little bit of excitement about what might be coming this season and into the future. And getting to have anybody related to the Gilligan line on the team is also a big plus as well. So thanks so much for coming on today. Thanks so much for bringing us all the way through. And thanks so much for talking a little bit about your nephew joining the program and your own memories about being on the team yourself. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for coming on. Like I said, thanks everybody for sticking all the way to the end. Make sure that you like and subscribe. It's going to be a great season. We've got another secret interview the second week of August that I will be announcing very soon who that's coming on. I'm very, very excited about that. And then I'll have the schedule preview with Jake Posey from Master Football. We're going to be having the preseason three keys to the game previews. Of course, we'll be rolling into the regular season itself and the game reviews and everything else that the season brings with it. So stick around for all of that. Make sure you like, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of it. Thanks again, Tim, for coming on. This was fantastic. And thanks everybody for sticking all the way to the end. Thanks so much for coming on, and go Big Blue.